My name is Alexis Rogers, and I'm the Customer Relationship Lead here at Right Capital. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and welcome to our webinar today on transforming your workflows with RightFlows. Now, whether or not you have already established workflow procedures or are looking to implement new ones, we will be walking through how you can leverage RightFlows, our cutting-edge integrated workflow management tool in Right Capital. At its core, RightFlows is designed to revolutionize your practice by providing a seamless experience within the Right Capital platform and to be another go-to solution in your toolbox. Now, RightFlows empowers you to curate and manage your distinctive financial planning workflows without ever leaving the Right Capital ecosystem. Whether your goal is to enhance client engagement, boost personal efficiency, or work more efficiently within your firm, RightFlows equips you with the essential tools for success. Now, another key aspect to RightFlows tools is that it allows for you to take your client engagement to the next level. Just like having an easy path towards team collaboration, you can seamlessly assign tasks to client within a workflow, which further enhances communication and directly involves your clients in the planning process in a way that allows you to build stronger relationships. Now, a very common question that I just want to address right away is that RightFlows is an extension of our current task functionality. All interactions within the client is the same as what we would have been doing for years. So nothing's really changing from the client perspective. This is really a workflow management station built to enhance your efficiency as an advisor. Just wanted to provide that back context or that backstory as to what RightFlow's purpose is before we dive into the logistics of how you can incorporate as part of your planning process in Right Capital. Now, today we are, of course, going to be reviewing how you can get started with RightFlows, how you can customize your workflows, and also just reviewing a couple of the popular workflows that are either already available as a default or just additional ones you might be using other tools available in Right Capital to create. So we'll be diving through all those nuances today. And as always, towards the end of this presentation, we're also going to be looking at the different resources that you have available when leveraging Right Capital. One of those resources being that during this webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A section to type out your questions there. More than happy to answer any questions you might have, whether it's looking at a specific use case or just any kind of functionality questions. So please don't hesitate to write out your questions there, and we'll have a nice Q&A towards the end of the webinar today. Now, switching gears into Right Capital, there's two main pieces of RightFlows that's important to note. The first is going to be the RightFlows tab, where we can build out templates. So this is going to be the station that we can go to either access existing templates or to start to create and customize new ones as needed. Now, one thing that I want to note before we dive further, because I see a couple of people are mentioning that they might have to jump off early, this is also going to be recorded and you will receive the recording in the follow-up email. So no worries if you have to jump off, completely understand. And another thing to note too for RightFlows is that this is going to be available for those that are Platinum users. So if you're not a Platinum user yet, please feel free to use the Q&A to type out your interest, or if you want to activate RightFlows, because this is something you have to opt into activating, please feel free to use this opportunity to do so in the Q&A section, or I'll show you towards the end who you can contact if you ever want to evaluate that in the future. So just a couple just important notes there before we dive into the functionality of RightFlows. So this particular dashboard is going to be kind of the starting point for when we do activate RightFlows, which is where we can access those default templates, like I said, or it's where we can go to start to create new ones. So with RightFlows, there are 6 default templates that come with the tool. The first one's going to be the new client workflow. This is really just kind of that aspect of engaging a new client, the prospect referral, initial call meeting, data gathering, the planning call, and a couple other ones as well. So these are defaults already going to be pre-filling some of these tasks for you. Same thing for quarterly review workflow. There's also an RMD, required minimum distribution workflow, that comes default with RightFlows. A Roth conversion opportunities workflow, it's one of our very popular tools in Right Capital, is leveraging tax strategies and planning for Roth conversions and tax efficiency. And the final two are setting up a new client without client access and setting up a new client with client access. Now, just some important things to note additionally, whenever we're talking about tasks, if we're looking to engage the client with tasks or RightFlow tasks, because we can boost that efficiency process with RightFlow templates, is if we're looking to engage the client would need to be invited to Right Capital to be able to access those tasks and to be able to complete them if desired. Another important thing to note here for RightFlows is that if we're looking for purely internal practices or procedures that we're trying to establish, that's also accomplishable. So you'll notice that there is that one for setting up a new client without client access. This is going to be more of an internally facing workflow rather than the one that's setting up a new client with client access, which can be more externally facing. It might have a different task that's facing towards the client and would be something that we'd be marking as visible. Just wanted to note that you can do either route, so you don't necessarily have to engage the client, but it certainly is a way that you can ease your practice of making it a lot more engaging for the client by leveraging the RightFlow templates or tasks in general. Now, some additional custom ones that I've already started to build, and a very popular use case is actually the Medicare filing one. For those of you who might have watched my previous webinar, similar to this, Medicare filing is always going to be one of those popular workflows. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes when it comes to, Medicare filing discussions, whether it's something you're looking to get into, something you've already do as part of your practice. And that's going to be similar to you looking to establish new workflows. So this is really intended to streamline that procedure you might be taking, whether it's an internally facing task for yourself or one where you engage the client. So some other examples might be you planning for different tax efficient strategies. Maybe you're looking at kind of expanding on some of the different opportunities available that we're going to cover in a second in terms of the RightIntel dashboard. So maybe it's insurance planning, looking at annuity products that you might be offering. That's going to be where the RightFlow templates can really come into play, where you can start to establish a lot of streamlined procedures that are automated within the RightFlows section. So starting with the Medicare filing that I already have established, this is going to be one of the ones we're building off of today. So one of the ways that we can start to create new templates is we can either choose to start from scratch when creating a new template by selecting Add Template, or we can copy off an existing one. So let's say, for example, I want to copy and build off my existing Medicare filing. I can then click on the three dots here, select Copy, and that's then going to duplicate that workflow. Because let's say, that particular practice works for most clients, but let's say I have a split in how I want to handle it for a different type of client that maybe is more engaged in the system. So let's say that's going to be our practice. So the first thing I want to do, and the first thing you probably want to do when creating a new workflow, is titling it. So we can either click into the title itself or select the three dots to retitle it. And let's say this is just our Medicare filing 2.0 workflow. Hit the check mark to save the name change, and then we can start to build from here. So you'll see within the RightFlows templates, there's going to be different planning steps or task steps that we have available to us. So within my Medicare filing 2.0 workflow, I have three different steps. I have the review eligibility step, the meeting prep step, and the Medicare filing stage. Now, within each step, that's where we go to start to define what we are looking to include as the tasks within that step. Now, we can completely customize what we title each step. This is relevant for whichever kind of workflow we're looking at. So maybe if this was us looking at a life insurance product, I'd probably look at reviewing their life insurance existing product, something like that. So for this particular one, we're starting off this workflow for Medicare filing with reviewing eligibility, because there's a couple different things that, a client might be eligible for in terms of, are they going to be filing for Social Security already? Are they going to be automatically enrolled and filing for certain types of programs with Medicare? Or are they going to be reviewing, Medicare Part D or just different types of offerings for Medicare? That's where this review eligibility step comes into play. So you'll see I already have a couple of those steps predefined for us because I copied my existing workflow. One thing that I want to note is that when we add a new workflow, we can, of course, start to add new tasks. And that's the same thing for either customizing this existing one or the one that I'm building off of already. So let's say for this one, I am going to be adding a task. And let's say because this is going to be targeting my more engaged clients, maybe the ones that need additional prep before larger conversations. Let's say that this is a task that I'm going to be assigning to the client to start to book a pre-meeting to kind of give them the heads up of what Medicare is before we even have the actual Medicare filing discussion. So let's say that's the case. When we add this new task in the workflow, we would then start to determine, do we want the due date to be reliant upon the step activation or when the workflow starts? Now, the workflow starts is probably going to be the most popular use case. This is probably going to be the one that is going to be more reliant on a set time frame, one that's probably a little bit more of a pressing kind of matter. So I could say that when I assign the workflow, when I start the workflow, they have 5 days to complete this task. So let's say that's the case. I'm going to give them 7 days. That's going to be what workflow start stands for. The step activation. Now, this is not going to be super relevant for the first step that we're in, but it's going to be more relevant for when we're in the second, third, and the other steps, because that is indicating that once I activate that next step in the workflow, or the client, once they complete the tasks in that existing step and they trigger the second step, that's when the due date's going to start for those additional steps. And we'll kind of walk through that in a client sample case as well. But just to define what those two terms mean, there's workflow starts for our due date, and then also step activation. And then from there, the other important part when creating a task is us assigning it to the responsible party. Now, we can either have this be assigned to the advisor, and with RightFlows, one of the additional benefits of this particular tool is that we can engage other people in the firm, and that includes maybe my assistant. So I could assign this to an advisor, assistant, the client, co-client, or I can do by groups, whether it's all advisors in the firm. Let's say we're all having all hands on deck for this particular conversation, all assistants, the entire firm, or specific people. So let's say in this case, this is going to be client and co-client facing. So we're going to select that. And then we can also mark the priority. This is going to be very similar to the existing functionality you'll see for assigning tasks currently. That's still relevant here, whether we want to mark this as a high priority task, low priority, or no particular priority at all. In this case, let's say this is high priority. We really want to get ahead of the conversation and make sure the client's really equipped with the knowledge, because we know that they need that extra hand-holding and conversation piece. And then another factor here is whether or not we want this task to be visible to the client. So if we don't want this to be visible to the client, we can click on the eye icon to hide it. But in this case, we do want it to be visible to the client because we're looking to engage them from here. So let's say, please book some time on my calendar to discuss Medicare filing in the future. And then maybe I also want to include my calendar link. So we can either create a hyperlink, we can customize this text as needed. So in this case, I can put the link here, but I also can just create the hyperlink by selecting the chain. Hit the check mark to save that particular link, and we'll see that hyperlink created for us. So same thing that for tasks, we can highlight things. So maybe we want to just highlight the first couple words here. We want it to bold it, italicize, or have this be a specific highlighted color. We certainly can do so. So it's still completely customizable in terms of the text or the visuals of the task itself. So maybe I'm just asking, please make sure you're booking that time with me so we're fully equipped before we even start to discuss the actual filing process, because maybe we just need to make sure they have that backstory. So I'm just going to walk through this because I know that a couple of people have already mentioned they want to kind of review this workflow in more depth themselves, but some of the additional tasks that I already have pre-filled in here are confirming if the client is enrolled in Social Security, as this can automatically enroll them in original Medicare, check employer's healthcare coverage, and if that will impact Medicare filing, confirming if the client is currently filing for regular retirement Social Security benefits. And then also just a note for myself and my assistant to review the client notes that I've already indicated in the plan to make sure if I've already had this discussion with them, that I'm already aware of this and I have all the notes that's needed. So this is the first step in the workflow. You will also see the ability to add notes in each step. So the notes section is going to be another way that this is purely internally facing. This is not going to be something that's visible to the client. And I'll showcase when we go to the My Advisor portal with an active workflow what this looks like. But this is purely going to be a way that I can either communicate internally to other people maybe involved in this workflow, or maybe this is a note for myself. Maybe I'm leaving a reference point of an article I read on, Medicare filing. Maybe we're looking at just different options for this specific workflow for a specific path and maybe evaluating COBRA, anything like that. So we can add notes here. This is only going to be visible in this particular step. It can be either a resource for myself, just a note for myself of the intention behind this step, so I can reorient myself, or maybe I'm trying to state the intention for this step with somebody else I'm working with. Maybe it's my assistant or otherwise. So we started to save that additional task. We have that second step, which is meeting prep. And this is going to be the one where we're actually talking about filing. This is when we're closer to that filing date, because this is the one that I'm targeting those more engaged clients and maybe the ones that need more prep before we make these larger decisions. So I already have indicated, want to book another meeting with them. I also want them to review our Medicare education tool in RightCapital, and I've directed them on where to go to access that. And then I've asked them to also upload their latest employer healthcare coverage documents. So that way I'm more prepared for this meeting as well. And then I have the one that's more internally facing that I just want to review any of those updates when they do upload that specific information to the vault. So that's the second step. And then we've got the Medicare filing stage. This is where I have an internally facing step. I want to make sure I'm updating the healthcare filing card as needed. And I want them to let me know when they've filed for Medicare as well. So this is an example of a couple things. And one thing that's also important to note, you still can customize these. So if I wanted to reorient the steps, maybe Medicare filing stage is going to go before meeting prep, I can drag and drop those as needed. It's not going to be the case for this. I'm going to rearrange that. And if we needed to add an additional step, maybe I wanted to have a post-meeting call with the client. Once those are all completed, I can add that additional step. Let's title it. Hit the check mark to save the name. Let's add that new task. And this is going to be relying upon step activation. So let's say after we've completed that final step of the meeting prep, now I'm going to give, 30 days before this task's due date for the client to book another kind of check-in with me, or maybe this is my internally facing one to make sure that's everything is okay. So let's say this is going to be just for myself and my assistant. And then we'll mark the priority as low priority because I'm going to give myself a little bit of a buffer here. This is just a check-in for myself to make sure everything in the plan is accurate and make sure nothing has changed since we last spoke. So let's say it's just going to be the final review of Medicare filing in the system. And we'll hit the save button, hit OK, and we can, of course, add more tasks as needed, but we'll leave that as is. So this is how we can start to customize workflows, create new ones. Now, the secondary space that's really important in RightCapital when we're trying to use RightFlows is, of course, the RightFlows dashboard here. But before we look at applying this to case studies and to our sample client today, one of the other important tools that really determines a lot of other popular use cases of RightFlows is actually our RightIntel dashboard. So in the RightIntel dashboard, this is going to be that book of business management station. This is where we can see a lot of insights into my book of business. But one of the other great pieces of RightIntel that helps us be more efficient in terms of seeing the opportunities in our book of business is, of course, the opportunities tab. So this is where we can see a lot of different opportunities across the book of business, whether it's looking at what cash is available for clients, assets held away, debt, or insurance policies. This might be beneficial if we are looking at that life insurance workflow and maybe we're focusing on term insurance. But the key one here is the key events. So key events is where we can see a lot of the clients' kind of triggered key events. This is relying upon things like their birth date, things like the key events being the Social Security filing age when they're reaching that, retirement age 50 catch-up contributions, age 59 and a half penalty-free withdrawals is another one, and Medicare filing as well. So there's a lot of different key events that we can have available here. And this is a nice dashboard to see which clients are going to be incurring some of those life key events. And this is a way we can see all this information and be prepared to maybe have those discussions proactively. And let's say this is one of the spaces that I'm relying upon to apply some of those workflows. So one of the ones that I have here is Medicare filing. Now, one thing with the RightIntel dashboard and the key events dashboard is we can sort by time frame. So if I'm trying to target this month, I can. If it's just this year or next year, we can sort as needed. So we scroll further down. Now in May and in June, we do have two of my clients, the Lannister family, they're going to be reaching Medicare filing. So this is going to be the family that I'm going to be applying that Medicare filing 2.0 workflow to, because they're ones that I know I'm going to need to have that additional conversation with and following those steps. So we can see that we have that event coming up for both of them in a couple months. So we have more time to kind of have that discussion and be more prepared. So we can see that's coming up in May and June for them. Once I have this information, I'm going to go to the RightFlows dashboard. And you'll see in the advisor portal, you still have the tasks tab with RightFlows. It's just going to be underneath the RightFlows module header here. So you still can view the same information with tasks. You can sort by either that table or board view, whichever one you prefer. You still can toggle between. It's just there's going to be a couple different key differences to note with tasks, is that now that RightFlows is activated, even when you add a single task, you now can assign that task to other members of the firm. So it's going to be one of the functionality differences that's important to note with just specific tasks in general. But under the workflow station, this is where I can go to access all of my existing workflows that are already assigned and activated. And we can also view ones that are scheduled in the future and which ones are completed. So if I wanted to look at my completed workflows, I can access them from here. Right now, I've toggled to just ones that I don't have available yet. We have active and scheduled workflows, already have a couple in place. And we can even see that I have one that's overdue with Jane Austen. So maybe I want to check in with a client to see what's going on there. Or maybe that's me telling myself, hey, I need to make sure that we're involved in that conversation with the client. So there's a lot of different filters here. We can filter by workflow. So if I'm really trying to target the Medicare Filing 2.0, I can select that. But when we're ready to, we can add a new workflow by clicking on Add Workflow, because we know that the Tyrion Lannister family, they are really cutting it close. We want to make sure we're already having those conversations because it's just a couple months. So I want to assign that workflow immediately. So I'm going to go to the workflow drop down. I then will see all those default workflows that I talked about earlier, and also the custom ones I've created as well. So let's activate the Medicare Filing 2.0. We can then indicate the starting date of this, whether I want this to start today or if I want it to start in a future date. And another important factor here is the frequency of this workflow. Now with Medicare filing, hopefully we're only having this workflow established once in a client plan, but we can change this from one time to either be a recurring monthly workflow, a quarterly workflow, semi-annual, or annual workflow. So the quarterly one is probably what we would select for that quarterly review workflow that we have pre-existing. In this case, we're going to leave it as one time. Now, a very nice benefit with the workflows is that you can still customize the workflow when assigning it. So you'll see down below, it automatically includes all steps in this workflow. We do have the option to deselect steps of the workflow as needed. So for example, let's say we've already had the review eligibility steps completed. Let's say it came up in our client meeting already with the Tyrion Lannister family. We've already talked about all those talking points. I've already looked at their eligibility because it came up and we immediately handled that. I can deselect that and we'll just see those other 3 steps remaining. So let's say that is the case. It's already taken care of. We can keep those selected and deselected. And then we just want to assign this to my client. So I'm going to look up the Tyrion Lannister family. So you can sort by client name, and you can also select multiple clients at once. In this case, we're just going to assign it to this one family. And then we can also assign it to specific advisors and assistants. So in this case, I can either assign it to the specific groups in my firm, whether it's all advisors and all assistants, the entire firm, if it is really that firm-wide initiative that I'm rolling out for this client. And then we can also assign the assistant as well. And hit save. Now, once I hit save, that's then activated that workflow. If I did have this scheduled for the future, it still would populate here because I have toggled to both active and scheduled future workflows. And so we can see which ones I have active. It's categorized by the workflow title. And I can scroll all the way to the right to see my Medicare Filing 2.0. And this is where we can access those existing workflows and customize as needed. So if I click into this workflow, I can see what is the status for this workflow that's existing. And we can click into it to still customize as needed. So if we needed to adjust anything after assigning the workflow, we still can go in and modify the tasks. We can add more tasks if needed. We can also add additional notes in here. This is purely going to be that internally facing notes board. We can also delete a step if it's no longer relevant. So let's say meeting prep was no longer relevant. We can hit delete and that would remove that step. And there would be no impacts here for the client specifically and for ourselves because we haven't activated this step. So you'll see which step is currently activated because it'll be highlighted with the triangle here and also be highlighted in blue. And we can also see how many steps have been completed. We see 0 steps have been completed. what steps have been activated, and how many steps are still not activated yet. So as an advisor in this workflow management station, we can efficiently bump ourselves up in the workflow by dragging and dropping this triangle. When we do so, we can then indicate whether we want to complete all outstanding tasks in this existing activated step, or just simply move to the next step and leave those tasks open. So let's say, for example, in that original example where maybe we've already taken care of the Medicare filing stages, we can complete all tasks and that will mark the step as completed fully. Or if we just need to bump up the workflow, maybe we're trying to go forward with a couple additional tasks, we can hit the move to next steps button, and that would leave all these tasks as open. Just another kind of piece that is important for the workflow management station. Now, one of the keys for the RightFlows, workflow station is that this is also supposed to be a process that is automated. So let's say, for example, these were all client-facing tasks, and the client has gone in and they've marked all of these as completed. That would then automatically trigger step 2. That would automatically bump them to step 2. Same thing as if I mark these as completed. If I click into the step and we check off both of these and mark complete, or even delete, in this case, we'll mark them as complete. It will then automatically bump us into step 2 of the workflow. And we'll see that kind of progress as we're continuing to complete the workflow. How many steps have been completed? How many steps are outstanding? How many are activated versus inactive? If I go back to all workflows, you'll see the same thing for some of my pre-existing workflows. So let's say for my quarterly review workflows with the Darcy family, we can see where I am. We've only completed the 1 step. We bumped forward to the final step, but we still have the mid-year check-in available from here. And those are still outstanding because we haven't had that yet, but we've already bumped forward in the 3rd quarter because maybe I'm trying to, have those future discussions a little bit sooner. Same thing for the Wednesday families. We can see we've completed the 1st step. It's all completed. And we still can go in and make additional customizations for some of these additional tasks, whether we want to add new ones, activate it completely, or delete. So still customizable from that regard. Now, one of the other important pieces that comes with tasks is if we are looking to engage the client with tasks, if they're client-facing, is I want to note that it is not going to impact their visual experience within tasks. It still is going to remain the same. So just an example, you go to the Tyrion Lannister family, you go to planning access. Now, if we do have the client already invited, I want to make sure that I'm inviting them to access tasks. I'm going to check that off from here and hit save, because what we indicate in the planning access tab is going to be what they would have access to the next time they log in. So if I am looking to have my client engage with tasks, I just want to make sure that they are going to have access to the tasks module. Now, just to give that preview, I'm going to open up the client in client access mode. That's going to give us the preview of what the client experience looks like from a tasks perspective. So from here, we'll see exactly what I have selected in the planning access section. And I'm going to go to dashboard tasks. And from here, we will see that classic tasks layout. We can see what tasks are overdue for this client, what tasks are due this week, in the future, and completed. Now the client can click into these and they can start to, check them off as needed and complete them to see this additional information. They can click on the link. And if you have granted the client permission to assign tasks back to you, they can assign them back to you as well. So this is the experience. Anything that's marked as not visible to the client is not going to be visible to the client in their client preview mode. And they can also toggle between table view and board view, whichever one they prefer. Same thing for yourself when you're accessing the client. Now, just an example, we just saw what the Tyrion Lannister preview looks like from the client perspective. If I open up the client as the advisor, we're going to see a slightly different experience under dashboard tasks. I'm going to toggle back to board view because that's what I prefer. We will see those tasks that are marked as hidden from client and the ones that are internally facing. So for those ones, the tasks that are included in the workflow that are assigned to other firm members, whether it's my assistant, myself, or other advisors in my firm, I can see those here, even though they're marked as not visible to the client because I'm still the advisor here, and we can go and customize. So you still have full control, you still can see those, but the client's experience and tasks is not going to change with RightFlows. RightFlows is purely intended to streamline and automate your process when it comes to a lot of workflows, whether it's those tasks you're looking to assign to yourself and other firm members or to clients. So there's a couple key things, and you still can assign tasks in the individual client plan as well. So if we're trying to add a new task, I can still assign that single task or one of my task templates. The key thing that I want to just note, just to reemphasize, when you add a task, with RightFlows being active, you would now have the ability to assign it to other members of the firm. So previously, without RightFlows, we would only have the option to assign this to myself as the advisor, the client or co-client, or all three of us. In this case, with RightFlows, you're going to see the additional option to assign to other people in the firm, whether it's your assistant or otherwise, but the other pieces of data entry for the task remains the same. So that's going to be one of the key differences once you activate RightFlows of how that impacts your experience adding a task, as it can also be applicable in terms of internal processes. What maybe you're trying to assign a one-time task to your assistant to check in with the client, whatever it is, you still can do that with a single task.